I've worked on contracts. I think my largest one was $20 billion, which is just astronomical. And some of the relationship, yeah, that just really amazing to work on both sides of those transactions and see them evolve and to work at those numbers. And then to be homeless 15 years ago, I'd be like, holy crap.
Right. Are you an accountant with a continuing education requirement? You can earn free NASBA-approved CPE for listening to this episode. Just visit earmark.app in your web browser, take a short quiz, and get your certificate. Hey everyone, welcome back to Earmark. I'm Blake Oliver. Today we're joined by Devon Coombs, a financial leader at Google Cloud with an incredible story. Devon went from being homeless at 21 to negotiating multi-billion-dollar deals at one of the world's top tech companies. Welcome to the show, Devon.
Hey, thank you so much, Blake. It's a pleasure to be on.
So you were homeless at 21. Take me back there. Like, how did this happen? How did you end up there? I imagine it was before you got into accounting, because accounting's fairly lucrative. Like, you don't have to be homeless if you're an accountant. What were you doing?
Yeah, not if you're doing it right, at least, right?
That's right.
I've met a few people who got divorced or had some pretty rough spots afterwards, but that's a different story. So I was actually in the music industry. When I was 18, I was in the music industry. I came out of the foster care system. My mom unfortunately passed when I was 15, and I had never met my father. And I tried to take that in stride and start my own business. This is before the 2007 recession. I was in Los Angeles, and lots of musicians and actors in Los Angeles. And I was lucky enough to have a lot of friends who had dads in the music industry. And I pretty much lived in their studios until I was 18 and decided I'd build my own. And so from 18 to 21, I owned a recording studio in North Hollywood called Antipode Records, where I also, to build it, I was waiting tables and doing a variety of night jobs. But I eventually built it and was recording bands and really didn't know what I was doing from a business side at all. I was just passionate about it. And this ultimately led to payments and things like broken down buses or broken down cars. I had a car that someone paid me in that fell apart while it was driving on the highway. Like literally the bottom fell out and I was like on a Fred Flintstone kind of a scenario, just running on the street. It was ridiculous. But I was completely destitute. After that, the business failed. I learned how rough it can get when businesses fail. My partners and my friends who I lent money to wound up essentially stealing from me at the end when things get rough. And I was out on my own. I was living in a car that I hadn't even paid off. I was sleeping in the car and kind of wondering, where does it go from here? Pretty destitute. You lose a lot of friends. You find out who your real friends are when you're completely broke. And I had no family and no one to turn to. And I tried to decide, what do I actually have control over and what went wrong? And accounting, funny enough, was a good way to explore that. So I went and committed to taking some business classes to learn how I screwed it up or what was in my control despite the recession. And I fell in love with accounting through that, funny enough. And that kind of started me off down the CPA journey, which was remarkable for me. And so, yeah, I had no clue that it would lead to me. Now I'm leaving Google now, and I'm going to be working for this firm PCG and building out a practice focused on being lean and helping the community and really trying to see what accounting can be for people. But I never thought it would be multi-billion-dollar deal negotiations when I was homeless living in my car, 15 years ago. So that was a bit of a rant. Happy to go unpack whatever you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, we have, I guess, somewhat similar stories. I moved to LA as a musician. I was a cello major in college. And so I wanted to be in those recording studios, like in your recording studio, working with bands, playing. And I had a safety net, right? So, but it was a strange experience because I'd never really thought too much about money growing up. And then when I got to LA and I started paying rent and I started gigging, and I was working as a barista at Starbucks, and I'm watching the money come into my account, and I'm watching the money go out of my account, and every month it just keeps getting a little bit lower, right? Like something is not working here. And I guess it wasn't until I actually had to pay my own bills that I started to pay attention to money. And that's really what got me interested in accounting, I think, was just trying to understand, what am I not doing right? Or how does this all work? So I guess I'm curious, like, what was, when you were running the recording studio, uh, like how did it go down into the ground, right? I mean, I know those are tough businesses. There's a lot of competition in LA. Uh, bands don't have a lot of money to pay for recording time, that sort of thing. Like, what was it that crashed the business?
Yeah, well, first off, it was just lack of business knowledge, I'd say, was the fundamental challenge. Like, I was passionate. I built a really cool studio. I was really proud of it, and we had good recording quality. But the first piece was just, I had no clue about fixed costs, or I had no like idea of how to make this thing profitable. It was more just buy cool stuff, record bands, and they'll pay me my fair rate. And that should work. Like, if you're passionate about something, it should work. That's not how the
Right.
world works. We all know that now. And learning things about like break even and fixed cost analysis and, projecting cash flows and financial forecasting was just a game changer for me. And that was not I grew up in complete poverty. I had no clue about anything other than living paycheck to paycheck until I took a class like accounting. And so that's a whole other issue. And that's why I also teach at community college and high schools, because we need to improve financial literacy overall for our America. But what really killed me, we're actually kind of afloat despite all of that, despite my complete ignorance. We stayed afloat just kind of through mere grit until 2007, a combination of the recession and then automation. Like Logic Tech came out, and my $100,000 studio of equipment, or I'm over exaggerating, $50,000 to $100,000 of just equipment that I had bought and set up, could be replaced with someone's, a computer and a MIDI app.
Yeah.
And so my rates went from charging $50 to $100 an hour for a recording session to I had to compete with people charging 10 during the recession. Like, oh, come record in my kitchen, and it'll get a similar quality especially for what I was doing, like rock bands and folk music. You didn't need a 10 mic setup for that. And yeah, so it was just crazy to see. So this AI revolution actually feels a lot like that. And I think you and I talked about that last time. It really feels a lot like that kind of change in the atmosphere. So
Yeah. I remember we talked about that on your show, Ambition Aligned. Great podcast. Everyone go subscribe. I had a similar experience. I was a cellist. We were in LA at really, I think we didn't overlap, but we were there at similar times. And the recession hit, and it was these orchestral samples that took over in my domain. So you no longer need a live cellist, you no longer need a live string quartet or an orchestra even. You can get pretty good results with a synthesizer, just a keyboard, a laptop, and a sound library that you could pay a few $100s for, maybe a few thousand, like depending on the quality. And a lot of people really couldn't tell the difference for the kind of work that we were doing, which was, television or just like backing for bands or something like that. So yeah, we have both been victims of automation in our first chosen profession.
yeah, I know, it's such a trip, and it's such a trip to think you are the one who triggered that. Like, it does feel a lot like the AI revolution now.
Yeah.
You can still survive in that profession, but it's a different career. You're the orchestrator of it all. You have to be the orchestrator of the music and the composer. You can't be the executor anymore. And I feel very similar with what we're doing in the AI space and accounting.
There's a metaphor here. There's an analogy here. And yeah, that really is what it's like. If you're a controller or a CFO, or even just honestly a manager, a staff accountant is now able to manage AI agents, or very soon will be able to. So it's like you'll have a team of bots that help you do your work. Is that where you see this going?
Yeah, 100%. I'm working a lot. I've been fortunate enough at Google being on the AI deals desk, and also now transitioning to PCG, where I'll be leading our being a strategic advisor for them and a director in their group, of seeing where the AI space is. And it really is, well, I'll tell you what it isn't to define what it is. It isn't us all building these custom AI tools that are going to be chatbots and take over the world. It is individuals like you and I and professionals who are going to be really savvy using LLMs to become 1,000 times more effective and bring down costs. But the second is agentic workflows, right? Of someone orchestrating just what you said. Like I was just reviewing the PPA of a company, and like doing the financial due diligence for a company that all it's doing is taking all the steps between real estate. Like, let's say you have like trying to get an HOA doc. You have to call the company. You can have a bot do that now. And then the bot can call the company. No one can tell that the bot's calling the company. And then it can write down all the information that the discussion has, and it can give it to another bot who can then determine if that's a HOA that they'd be interested in pursuing or not. And then that can send it to the loan facilitators. All of those like little jobs in between are just going to be little bots talking to each other, and humans can't even tell the difference. You won't be able to know that you're talking to a bot anymore or not. And so that's kind of the future. And then for us accountants, we'll be managing those workflows and looking for quality and improvement out of it, which is very weird and fascinating future, but similar to what we did, right? It's just like, it's taking the cellist. You're taking the cellist out, and now it's just someone using MIDI, right? Essentially.
Yeah. The composer at the keyboard, the orchestrator producing all those sounds themselves, they still have to have the vision for it. You have to know what you want. You have to at least be able to hum a melody. But now we have all this automation to do it. It lowers the cost. So there are downsides, right? If you are doing that job that is getting automated, you're not going to be doing that job anymore. That's what you and I experienced. But if you are the orchestrator or the composer who can learn these tools, you have like infinite work now.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge, though, is I that's where I feel sad. And that's why I'm going back into teaching, is to teach people these tools, because we are kind of closing the door for a lot of the profession. Like, at least for me, going in and learning from people was really helpful. Like, I learned most from my failed business, but it was also helpful to work in CPA firms. And if you take away all those staff jobs, or automatically just make you the creative mastermind of it all, you're going to miss out on some experience. So figuring out how to retool the next generation is going to be really important there. But
continuing our analogy, right? Like, if you are learning as a musician, it helps to be in the studio playing an instrument to see how it all happens, or be in the orchestra, or be in the string quartet. And if you can't do that anymore, how do you learn the bigger picture? You can't just take accountants out of school and give them like a manager role. They have to somehow learn into that role. But what jobs are there going to be?
Yeah, that's the challenge. It's a real challenge. I don't know. And it's up to the profession that hopefully we can at least keep those spots open, or figure out as educators how to have a multifaceted approach to thinking big picture. Yeah. But for me, it's challenging. I don't know, like, can you be a composer without knowing an instrument? I don't know if you could be a good composer without learning an instrument. Yeah.
I don't know of any. There has to be, you have to have something. You have to play the piano at the very least. Right. So it's fascinating. Yeah. Well, I want to come back to that, but first let's continue on this journey you had, right? So you were living in your car, you were working whatever job you could to pay the bills. I assume you got out of the car and into some place to sleep, and you started taking accounting classes. Like, what made you want to get into like business or accounting? It was the studio failure, or?
Well, the studio failure was a big motivator, but I was thinking more like, oh, maybe I'll go be, also just because I was jaded about my partners at the time. I just had no contracts, and I was like, maybe I'll go be a music attorney. That was kind of, and I have to learn business as part to go to law school. So that was kind of my thought. And I took accounting and did an internship with accounting because I was picking up any odd job for pay. And I was like, wow, I'm really surprised how creative I can be in this space, how much there is to learn. It's numbers, which is very technology driven, when like me working in the studio. And it was like creative problem solving. And so I actually really enjoyed it. I was surprised by how much I liked doing the work, that it kind of derailed me from law, even though I was really good at that as well. And then I also worked with a CPA who was a nice guy, but quite frankly, he wasn't that good. He was kind of scatterbrained and unorganized, and and he had a successful firm. He was making great money. And here's this guy who I'm like, pretty disorganized, pretty like not keeping clients happy, running this weird tax practice. And he was making bank. And I was like, that would be nice. But like, if he could do it, I could probably do it, and probably do it a little better. And so he motivated me in that way. And it was nice of him to give me that opportunity. Decent guy. But just like his kind of incompetence, it kind of encouraged me a bit.
I mean, it's funny to think that like the worst CPA probably makes more money than the best orchestra musician. Like,
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
that says something about the value of what we do.
Oh, and that gave me such security. Like, and that's why accounting, I still believe, is such a great profession. Is it gave me that direct path to security. Like, oh, I can finish college. There's this group of a lot of CPAs are great mentors and great people. There's this group of people who want you to succeed if you're going down this path. And it was a clear path to make in what at that time was like $50,000 a year if I got into Big Four. And that was a life-changing amount of money for me. I could actually pay rent and like go on dates that weren't like, go on a hike or something. I could actually have a real life. And it was, yeah. And that accounting unlocked that for me 100%. And all of the people around the profession, it's just such a, like, it's still one of the only, not the only, but one of the few apprentice driven professions now where like people actually take people under their wing and try to help them grow their careers. Right?
So you were doing your classes at Northridge?
Yeah, I started at a community college. Yeah, I started at a community college called Pierce College, and I had some of my best teachers there. And that's why I go teach at community colleges now. I think there's a lot of students that just can't afford it and need the help. And I want, you can still get really quality education. Yeah.
You ever watch that show Community?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's dead on.
I think Pierce College is the model for that college, and that's why they named Chevy Chase's character Pierce.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I watched the show, which is funny. And to be clear, Pierce College itself was pretty janky. Going there was always just like fences up and buildings that were like old and deconstructed. You've been to the valley; it's just so hot that heat destroys all the buildings. But I met great teachers there. I met like a lot of times you get cool professionals who kind of wanted to give back, and they go to that to learn. So I did that, and then I went to CSUN, where it was just a state college, but I got a full ride there at CSUN. And I got to meet Chuck Noski, who was a former alum who wound up being the CFO for Wells Fargo. And he became a close friend and mentor of mine through going to state college. So I didn't pay for college. I got paid to go to college and then got a great career out of it. And quite frankly, I don't know any of my friends who went in other professions who got that kind of benefit. It was I still think accounting is just killer for that.
Yeah. Well, and CSUN is a really well-respected program. Like, amazing CFOs come out of CSUN, and like you don't hear that a lot about like Cal State Northridge. I think it's sort of under the radar. I remember when I was thinking about doing my accounting, it was actually like difficult to get in there.
Yeah, so, they made it tough. That we had a Professor Weiss who's still there, and he must be a bajillion years old. I love the guy, but he's just taught forever, and he was a lawyer too, and he would have like a 40% pass rate for his intermediate accounting class. He's like, I want it to be hard for you to be here because I want the people who succeed here to be good in the profession. And he gave examples of like putting up a piece of paper, and he's like, if you're going to pass this class, I need you to not crumple this paper, because once it's crumpled, you can't de-wrinkle it. And like that's the importance of this reputation. It was a great school.
So then where did you go after you got your accounting degree? Did you go to Deloitte after that, straight after?
Yeah, so I went to Deloitte. I got my CPA. I took all my tests in a matter of like 2 months, passed them all. And at my wife's prodding, I didn't want to. I was pretty tired from like working multiple jobs and going through school. But I took that CPA, which was one of the best things I ever did. I'm glad she pushed me to do it in that summer, in the hot heat of Sherman Oaks in a bad AC in a crappy apartment, but I still knocked it out. And then I went to Deloitte. And one of the cool things about my career at Deloitte was bringing in my business knowledge. So I came in a little older than a lot of the 22 or 23 year olds. I was 26 or 27 at the time. And
doing audit?
I was doing audit. Yep. And I made it a goal of mine to win business my first year, because everyone was like, wait till you're a director or senior manager and then you can worry about winning business. Me owning a business knows that like the most important thing about doing anything is being able to make money and make clients happy. And I didn't want to just be some staff person who did reconciliations. I really wanted to learn. And I was already top of my class at CSUN and a little older. And so I did cold calls and to like 1,000 different people on LinkedIn when LinkedIn was a new platform, and met with controllers and actually won a client in my first 9 months at Deloitte.
Did you just do that on your own, or did you ask somebody if you could do this? Like, how did you?
No, I just did it. I just did it. Yeah, I took the credit card and like took a bunch of people out to dinner and lunch and just ran it under business development expense and won a client. And I remember the partner I worked with at the time was like, there's no way this is going to work, Devon. You're like, no one does this. I'll humor you. I'll go with you to the pitch. but like this just doesn't happen. And then we won the pitch. And he's like, what the, like, he just like was flabbergasted. And it was a great company called Go Guardian in Culver City. And I like got our lead in audit my first year, and it was like a first year audit. And I learned a ton through that experience, but I also learned that like Deloitte wasn't going to compensate me for that ambition. They gave me like $100. They gave me like $100 bonus for winning a $100,000 client. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't the right place to stick around.
Did you say you did like 1,000 cold calls?
Yeah, 1,000. Yep.
So what, you just like every morning I'm calling X people that I found on LinkedIn, seeing if I can get a meeting?
Yeah, so I would say cold calls or cold emails, but it would be essentially go on LinkedIn, search for every controller in Los Angeles, and just write them and say, hey, I'm at Deloitte. I'm trying to learn more about the profession, and I'm also trying to like help people. And so I know I'm new to this, but if you give me your time, I'd love to learn from you. And I promise you I'd give you more attention than most of the partners here. And one guy, I got 10 calls, and then out of that, those 10 like real, like, hey, well, let's talk. One guy gave me the shot, which was really cool. This guy, Elliot at Go Guardian. And it just totally changed my perception of the career. I got to do 606 with them. It was like one of our first 606 clients out there, and do a first year audit because we didn't have any tech space out there. And I really wanted a tech client. I didn't want to do we had a lot of financial services, which was kind of boring to me.
So you got to lead an audit in your like first year.
Yep. Yeah.
That's so cool. It must have given you kind of a reputation at Deloitte.
Yeah. They paraded me around the senior managers. They actually put me in a meeting in front of all the senior managers and said, hey, if Devon can do it, why can't you guys? Which was pretty brutal.
Oh, man. Yeah, now you're the enemy of all those senior managers. That's great. Oh, wow.
Yeah. It made my career very short-lived at Deloitte, unfortunately.
Really? So, yeah, tell me about that. What happened after that?
Well, it became clear that no matter how high-performing I was, like I got the top ranks over there, that there's no way I could skip the ladder. It's just the culture. So like, hey, stick around, and in 8 years, maybe you could be on a faster track to partner. But then I got a call from a friend in San Jose, where my wife's family is, at Effectus Group, which is a much smaller firm. They're saying, we heard you won some business. If you could do that for us here, we'll give you a commission and we'll double your pay if you start doing 606 and IPO implementations here. And so I moved up. I said, hell yeah. And I talked to all my friends at Deloitte and my mentors, and they said, Devon, you'd be stupid not to do this. We'll take you back anytime. And we probably take you back and get you a promotion if you do this, but we can't get you a promotion if you stay inside, which again, another problem with the industry. It makes absolutely no sense to me, but we'll get there. And so, I joined the company Effectus Group, which was a huge advantage to my career because we were a 20-person firm when I joined, and I got to lead over 10 606 implementations. I did a few S1s. I did a lot of PPA and due diligence works and acquisitions. And it was just essentially me running the show. Like, we're such a small firm. It was me working directly with the clients and building my reputation up here, which was just awesome.
So this is a CPE podcast. So maybe this would be a great opportunity for you to give your perspective on 606, ASC 606. Mm-hmm. Like briefly, what is it for those who are new, and tell us about your experience with it, because I think that was all rolling out at that time. It was like brand new, right?
Yeah, I did a ton of implementations for 606. So ASC 606 is a revenue recognition standard that launched at that time. I can't quote the exact date, but I'm guessing about 10 years ago.
Yeah, so sounds
2015. Right. Yeah, 2015-ish. And the whole main guidance there that changed was we were moving away from revenues recognized as earned to revenues recognized as performance obligations are satisfied. And so we went away from a more prescriptive type of guidance to a more judgment-forward guidance. And there was a lot of discussion on what defines your performance obligation as a company. What's the definition of it in the context of your contract and on its face. And no one really knew how to apply it. It became really like, are your SKUs actually what is defined as a performance obligation according to the literature? And does that mean you have to refine all of your data sets? And how do you recognize revenue accordingly? And you even had situations where you could recognize revenue well before billings. right? And you'd have these concepts of like contract assets and contract liabilities instead of deferred revenue. And so mainly this changed software and cloud-based companies because you no longer just had like a license portion of your revenue. You had to split, like you used to have more of like a ratable license revenue of, yeah, we sell your license and we'd figure out like over the term, we just kind of recognize it ratably, which honestly, from a consistency standpoint, made it easier to account for and easier to compare companies. So maybe we went a little off there from the FASB's perspective. But for us, it was like you have to split the license portion from the support portion, even if it's not explicit in a contract. So assigning fair values and then ultimately recognize the license portion up front, which is a really large change for a lot of software and SaaS-based companies.
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
I could talk more about that. I could talk about 606 for 1,000 hours. And I'm going to come on Earmark and do a bunch of deep dives in the near future as soon as
I'd love, we've been talking about this, like some webinars, deep dives into this for software companies. I find it fascinating because, you can't just simply, like, the accounting can't just simply follow the contract anymore, is kind of my big takeaway. That's kind of, you could do that in the past, right? You could just like you said, recognize revenue over the term of that contract, and you didn't have to split out all this stuff. And now it feels like it's a lot more complex than it used to be. Do you think it's helped, like in terms of investor information? Do you think that it's made financials more useful, or has it just created more work for accountants?
Yeah, I think my 2 cents is that I think it's created more work for accountants. I think it's added a lot more complexity. And I believe the spirit of it was good. I believe like the idea was if everyone aims towards honesty and the best efforts, that if we try to look at the substance of the underlying transaction and match the pattern of revenue recognition and classification in alignment with that substance over the form, the contract, that's more valuable to the investment community. The reality is no company has the resources to actually do that level of diligence or the effort. So now it's just created this very complex requirement and oversight that you really need very technical accountants. There's probably only a few hundred of us in the world who, at my level of experience, to come in and actually do it correctly. And it becomes even much more challenging to audit because the auditors don't even know that level of the technical requirements for the guidance. And so it's created this big hurdle for a lot of companies and not necessarily a huge value add. Even though the spirit of it was correct, I just don't think the companies have the resourcing or the audit firms have the resourcing to implement according to that spirit. And it raises some questions around like that cost benefit principle of like, did we really provide a benefit that outweighed the costs there?
Right. I feel like that gets lost when the FASB meets. They forget about that foundational principle of accounting, that the cost of the information should not exceed the benefit of the information. So how did you become an expert on 606? Like, I mean, you're very, I don't know, self-motivated. Did you just like learn it yourself? Like where did you figure this stuff out?
Yeah. So what was actually really funny was it was the firm. I was lucky enough. I was one of the first people to do it at Deloitte. Right, but Deloitte didn't even have it. They spun up this technical accounting advisory practice, but I was part of the beta for that, essentially, like the pilot group, because I had won that client and they were looking for that type of work. I was like doing pretty complex technical work like stock-based compensation, 606, valuations of derivatives. I kind of find my specialty there. And then when I went to Effectus Group, that was the bread and butter over those years. No one knew how to implement it. Everyone was stuck in the 605 world and VSOE, and no one knew how to do SSP allocations. Just no one knew the guidance. And it came out and it was like thousands of pages of literature. Like no one had the time to go read and digest this information. And so I found the time. And so I went through and I actually printed it all out and I read from page to page, from start to finish, the entire guidance, and then just practiced it on a bunch of clients. And so I had 10 different clients that I did 606 implementations for in a period of 2 years. And I just would go through them, and my life was essentially 606 and IPOs for that 2 years. And the market was really hot at the time. So everyone was ramping up for IPOs. And
They all had to get
Being
their
on the
606 in order.
yeah, they all needed to get it in order.
You
And
read 1,000 pages of
yeah,
606 guidance?
I made it
Wow.
I would print it and I'd go through 30 pages every single night, and then I'd see how I'd apply it. But the best way I learned was just case studies of like, okay, here's they're looking for, here's a software company or a call center company, and they have this level of professional service that they also do on it. How would this apply to the guidance? And I went through thousands of examples like that over a period of 2 years. And because, mostly from imposter syndrome. I was like, I'm only 1 year into my career, 1 or 2 years into my career, and I'm leading these huge engagements. I better catch up. But then I realized no one knew it. And so I quickly became the expert. And that was kind of exemplified when I had led Automation Anywhere 606 implementation, which was like a multi-billion-dollar unicorn out here in the Bay Area. And I won the engagement. Like in my first 6 months at Effectus Group, I had won one of our largest engagements to do this massive implementation because I had become an expert in the space, which blew my mind and made me realize, like, if you really, something about this profession, if you really try and become an expert in a little niche, like you just put some effort in for 6 months or a year, you can really blow other people out of the water, right? Like there's not a lot of accountants who get a deep dive expertise in 606 or stock-based comp or some of those complexities.
Okay, so how did you go from Effectus Group to Google?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I had started teaching while I was at Effectus Group and doing more business development, and my career was going really well. But my daughter was born, and it was a huge blessing in my life. But it was a big wake-up call because I remember actually being like just cutting the umbilical cord from my daughter. And I got a call from one of the head partners at Effectus Group, who I don't believe is no longer with them. And I thought he was calling to congratulate me. I thought he was like, hey, Devon, because I sent that email. I sent the email in the morning saying, hey, I'm going to hospital with my wife. I can't work anymore. I'm going on paternity leave only for a couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks. He called me, and in the hospital, he said, hey, Devon, can you send out this invoice to this client? I'm like, hey, I won't say his name, but hey, I am in the hospital. I just cut the umbilical cord. And he was like, that's gross. Like, can you just go home and send the invoice? And I said, no, I'm off. I am at the hospital with my wife with my new baby. I'll be back in 3 weeks. I gave you all the information. He said, okay, but we'll talk about this when you're back. And then in my head, I was like, okay, I was already working 100-hour weeks very regularly in the space. And I said, okay, this isn't the kind of person I want to be. I want to be a present father. And Google had a really good reputation for work-life balance. And one of the managing directors of Effectus had left to there and been reaching out to me regularly and about a 606 role they needed in Google Cloud. And so I followed up with them the next day, and I kind of got a job within the first month. And so funny enough, I joined Google my anniversary with Google was about 1 month after my daughter being born, specifically because of that reason. And
So basically, you took the initiative to learn 606 in your role at Effectus. You kicked butt there, and then you just were able to join Google. And it was because you took that initiative to learn this thing that was really difficult and not a lot of people wanted to figure out. And so you were the ASC 606 guy there at Google.
Yeah, exactly. And the interviews were really tough. I had interviewed with a few other people who were 606 experts there, and I was just able to outcompete all of the other interviewers. And they're like, your years of experience are less, but they actually up-leveled me when I joined because my expertise was so high in the area. They were all kind of shocked. And then I was able to get an early promotion at Google because I was able to come in with, like, surprisingly, a lot of the people who were from Big Four who had went to Google only had 1 or 2 big clients, maybe like a Cisco or an Apple. But me getting to work with 10 plus startups and S1s was much more relevant to like the pace of a Google Cloud at the time. And so I was quickly able to make a name for myself as like a very sales friendly advisor. And I got to do a lot of really amazing work at Google Cloud.
Which includes negotiating billion-dollar deals. Tell me about that, because not a lot of accountants get to be in the room when those deals are made.
I think that was the coolest part of the job that I wasn't expecting. Is at the time Google Cloud was brand new. Essentially, it was like in the first few years of the business, and we were figuring out we were almost a bet still. Like Google does a lot of different bets, and Google wasn't sure if it was going to become the giant behemoth that it is now, growing 30% year over year and just tens of billions of dollars of revenue. And it being in those rooms was just very fascinating, because I would work with we'd generally have a salesperson, and so we'd have salespeople on the other side as well. Salespeople, legal people, finance people, deal negotiation experts, maybe 20, 30 experts on the call. And the idea in these drafting sessions were, how do we get an optimal outcome for both sides? And so they wanted an accounting expert in the room to help from a finance perspective, but also to help from a contractual perspective on managing things like, how can we get to keep the customer happy, but still not have the negative consequences of this termination for convenience language? Can we add a penalty in? Can we figure out some contingent rights? And what would that look like from a valuation perspective in order to optimize our backlog and our accounting and finance outcomes while still meeting the customer's needs? And so that became a really amazing experience for me, just to learn from the best in the world, like some of the top VPs at Google Cloud, who've been the top salespeople at other organizations, on just how to negotiate deals and how to do it right and how to do strategic partnerships, but also how to give good, helpful accounting advice to our partners. Yeah.
What kind of deals are we talking about? Like, can you give me names? Are these household names?
Yeah. Google is, if you pick any random FANG company, you probably have some kind of deal with them, unless they're a strict competitor, right? And so you can pick any major name, and I can't think of which ones are disclosed, so I got to be careful there. But yeah, I'd say most of our Fortune 5, like, randomly choose from the Fortune 500, and we probably have a contract with them, right?
Got
and
it.
I've worked on contracts. I think my largest one was $20 billion, which is just astronomical. And some of the relationship, they're just really amazing to work on both sides of those transactions and see them evolve, and to work at those numbers, and then to be homeless 15 years ago, I'd be like, holy crap.
Right.
Yeah.
You're sitting in the room making a $20 billion deal happen, and you're thinking, I used to sleep in my Honda.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then what a trip is, also how undervalued accountants are. It's unfortunate. Like, I was in the room working with the top sales. I had the top salespeople in the world who would call me on my cell phone and ask me for advice at all times a day, but they'd be getting commissions as a percentage of that $1 billion.
Right.
And then I still got paid well at Google. I'm not complaining, but like, not $1 commissions,
Right.
Yeah.
Sort of just the extreme, at Google, I'm sure it's just everything is extreme because of the size of the company and the deals being done. That's amazing. So, okay, so you're leaving Google. I want to talk about PCG.
Okay.
But before that, AI, right? Automation, going back to this idea that accountants, everybody really, is becoming, or has the potential to become, an orchestrator as opposed to an individual session musician, or the recording engineer, right? Or the producer. We're all producers now instead of just musicians. So what kind of AI stuff are you doing in real life at Google that, like, makes you think that this agentic workflow stuff is going to be what everyone's doing?
Yeah, I would say seeing the output of people using it versus not is what's showing me the future. And so first, I'm lucky enough. So in Google, I did the AI deals desk for a while. Then I was the chief of staff for the controllership organization for a few years, which was an honor. And I got to really develop expertise on how we can optimize internally and internal structuring. And then I went back to be the AI deals desk in the new stage of what does this mean from a Gen AI perspective? And I've got to see how we're partnering with our clients. And a lot of it from a Google perspective is, how can we use our LLMs in order to facilitate stronger efficiencies, like cut costs, right? And a lot of that's through, I'd say, voice, speech, text recognition, but just the ability to have conversations with your phone and it to actually be beneficial. And so that's where I'd say the first thing that I'm seeing kind of change the landscape. So imagine if you had to write a memo, instead of writing the memo by hand, and doing all the research on your walk. You could talk to your phone about all the concepts that you're aware of that need to be drafted in the memo, and then just tell it to draft it for you. And now you cut out all the staff time and you cut out, but that's applied to all different industries. Imagine fast food industries. You no longer have to talk to a person at the drive-through window. You're talking to a robot, but you would never know. You would never know that it's a AI agent. Or imagine that on the extreme, I've heard of things like, imagine that you don't even plan your own trips anymore. That you have an agent that's like, hey, you haven't taken a trip in 3 months. Well, we've already worked with these other agents to give you these 3 packages, and we're confident in knowing your background that this would be your favorite. And we booked the flights, and we've rented the cars, and we booked the hotels, and we've turned in your notice to your employer about you're taking your vacation, and you just have to go on the trip, right? And so how you take all of these admin tasks out and kind of just automate it, as long as it's technologically grounded. The big limitation there is data. And so that's something that's always going to be like, whoever has proprietary access to workflows, if you're really knowledgeable about a specific industry, that orchestration element, that's still needed. But it's not people. That's kind of the IP in the transaction is, are you bringing an expertise about a certain workflow on how to combine these different bots that are owned by these LLMs? And then you have the hallucination risk also of just like, they still make up crap. Yeah.
Although that's gotten so small now. I remember when I first started, adding AI into our workflows here at Earmark, hallucination was a problem. The AIs would invent facts that were not in podcast transcripts and would create multiple choice questions that just did not meet with reality. But now that there are these thinking models, I have not seen that happen in a long time since we moved over to like Claude 3.7 or to, GPT-01. We just don't get hallucinations at any scale anymore. So I feel like that's being solved. But like you said, the issue is access to data. Agents are only as useful as the information they have, just like people, right? So are you comfortable giving a chatbot, an agent, access to your email, your calendar, your Google Drive, all of that? I've done that now. Claude just enabled that, where I can search my Gmail now from Claude.
That's cool. But that's a big privacy question, right? It's a huge.
Right.
A lot of people wouldn't be comfortable with that. Yeah.
I don't know if I would trust ChatGPT with that information, just based on some of the things that Sam Altman has said. Anthropic, on the other hand, right? I feel a little cozier with them, but still, that could be really misused. And so I've said on our show, on the accounting podcast, that I feel like even though Google was really slow to start with AI and still is struggling to, build it into the products in a way that people actually want to use it, long term, whoever has the data that the AI is going to work with will win, because that's how you make it really useful, right? You need to be able to edit my calendar and send an email on my behalf and attach a document, right? That stuff, like these chatbots alone, are just like useless, like from that standpoint, like in terms of like being agents for me. So I trust Google already with all my stuff, right? We're a Google Workspace company. So for me to let Google, add an LLM on top, not a big deal.
Yeah, Google's just LLM has to get better. Unfortunately, it's just so much. It's unequivocally not as good as ChatGPT and everything.
But that's solvable because all this is
they'll
open
get
source,
there, though.
right? It's they don't have to like develop the LLMs. They just have to develop the workflow around it. And and same thing for Microsoft, right?
Yeah, and so I think that's going to be the interesting thing to see where this all goes. I kind of envision there's kind of 3 paths I can see. Either going like these fine-tuned models. I have friends I'm more than happy to introduce you to, the company called TA-Bot, like ex-Google engineer and ex-Big Four, who are creating like technical accounting writing software. And it's about fine-tuned models against all the guidance. Pros of that is you might have a more automated technical memo writing software that's based really honed in on the guidance. The problem is LLMs are so good that they might just catch up. Like even the fine tuning might not be as good as the LLM and be based on the investments. The next is like, I have a friend at Inkwise, who's a founder, and he's AI assisted writing flows. And so the idea is you still do professional writing, but we have AI agents in the background who can help, like once you're done with it, to package it as an email, to package it as a video, to package it as whatever you need to increase the workflows and help you finish the doc. So that's interesting, and I see the value there. But then you have the data question, which is then kind of like Google and all this. Yeah,
and you pointed out something, which is that the models are getting so much better so fast that like, some stuff that I'm trying now with O3 with ChatGPT, it's so good at it. I don't even need to create a project where I have custom instructions. I just say what I want and I give it some data and it does it. Whereas I used to have to break all these, writing tasks down into smaller steps. You don't even need to do it anymore. So it's like, are the LLMs going to advance so quickly that all of the workflow that we're building on top to kind of like solve the things it can't quite do just becomes irrelevant? I don't know.
Well, it reminds me of the music industry, right, man? It's like, just like the MIDI music used to be crap. It used to be like Zelda music or video game music, and there's no way but now it's really tough to tell unless you're doing like a Lord of the Rings or something. It's really tough to tell the difference between a synthetic cello and a live cello. And yeah.
Have you tried taking ASC 606 and like dumping it into like the latest, model and seeing if it can just like figure it out? Like the way you did, right? Like that you read through 1,000 pages of guidance and a bunch of examples and you figured it out. Like, how long before we have an AI agent that can just do what you did?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think we're there. I think, so the way I see it is only two things are kind of saving the profession is, one, you need at least the judgment to know it's right. And luckily, because of the judgmental standard, you can have interpretations. So it's not going to be the best at giving you options based off of certain pieces. Like, I actually think that we can go this way and based on the consistency of all our policies. The second is the privacy. Like, you just can't dump a bunch of company policies and confidential documents into ChatGPT, or we can and you just see what happens.
I mean, yeah, people are doing it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. You shouldn't be. Who knows? Because then it's very obvious, at least to me, that it becomes searchable. Like, and once you start asking questions in ChatGPT or adding information, it becomes part of the network that you can search against. And so things with NDAs and stuff can become pretty risky. So being able to interpret it and ask the right questions in a confidential matter is still valuable. But it's only a matter of time before we have like private workflows, like you said, private databases or private clouds that have companies' data on it that you can use these LLMs against. That's probably the whole private cloud movement is actually going to be pretty huge in the future. Kind of like how we kind of went from servers on site to cloud. Now I think we're going to go more back to private cloud for privacy concerns when we're using these data. So.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to have my own LLM. I've toyed around with that idea of just like, get a computer, run an LLM on it. But it's just so convenient to use the cloud.
Yeah, exactly. It's so tough. It's so tough.
But it's funny. It's like it's cloud is actually in some ways more expensive now than on-prem, but the convenience of it is what, like that's why people are doing it.
Well, it's just like like photos, right? Like, who wants to upload all their photos to a hard drive and then get out the hard? Just spend $100 a month and get a cloud agent,
exactly.
Right? Even though it's more expensive. Yeah.
So you mentioned you're leaving Google Cloud and you're going to PCG. What is PCG?
PCG is Principal Consulting Group. It's a small firm in the Bay Area, but they also have a New York and like a U.S. presence, focused on technical accounting, financial due diligence, and fractional CFO work. Main reason for doing it is partially because of this movement. First off, I had a lot of opportunities to stay at Google or to leave Google, but I feel with the AI movement, it is really a time where we can add more value to the profession by leaning in and using this technology to teach people, help drive better outcomes faster. And so I think consulting is just a great way to do that. And it's also just a great group of people, most ex-Big Four accountants who have created a really good, valuable, communal, like a very community-focused firm. Like, everyone's very supportive and having a good time and trying to do great work for people and their clients. So I thought that'd be fun for the next adventure to go teach and to go build out a firm kind of leaning into this AI future rather than working my way up at the big bureaucratic company. But I did learn a ton at Google. It was like hugely valuable for me to take those skills and try to take that and combine it with AI to help others in the profession.
There's no better time to be going off on your own, really. I mean, AI is so helpful for all this stuff that I have to do as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a startup founder. If I don't know how to do something, I can just ask Perplexity now, right? And I can get like pretty darn good answers. I had to draft a legal agreement, an operating agreement, and it would have cost me, thousands of dollars in legal fees to go back and forth on the phone with a lawyer, and more annoying would have been the time required. But I was able to just get on a call, record the call, and use that transcript to draft the terms, and then get an AI to kind of drop this into a template that an attorney could review and look for any issues. That's where we're at now. So I feel like you're getting into consulting at a great time because, well, as long as you're not just like making fake PowerPoints, right? Like McKinsey, if you're actually doing real work, then, you can be 10x, right? 100x any other consultant.
Well, that's my goal, right? I'm like, hey, if I can do better quality work with higher judgment applied with all my expertise and 1/10 the costs. And hey, if I do that for you, pay me 2 times whatever I'm charging you, like let's work it out. So you're still going to get a win at the end of it,
Make sure you get a percentage, get points on the deal like those salespeople, that's
where the win is. We don't do the best as accountants. But yeah, that's what I'm excited for. And I think it's going to be a fun adventure to go on and a way to help people through the process. So if anyone's looking for help on a technical accounting or fractional CFO that's AI applied, people can reach out.
So technical accounting, so like the stuff you were doing with ASC 606, revenue recognition, all that, but also CFO type work?
Yeah, fractional CFO work, financial due diligence. I've done a ton of, I have a very extensive background from like technical accounting implementations, S1 preparation, post-acquisition integration, kind of imagine me as your fractional CAO, I guess would be the best way to think about it.
Fractional Chief Accounting Officer. I love it.
Yeah.
Devon, where should people go to connect with you online or to get in touch with you about any opportunities?
Yeah, you go to my website, devoncoombs.com. You go to the PCG website, or you can go to my LinkedIn, Devon Coombs on LinkedIn, or my YouTube channel, Ambition Aligned, where you were on and was a really fun episode talking to you. So
go listen to that one. And Devon, I can't wait to collaborate with you more on technical content, and I look forward to hanging with you on a future podcast episode.
Yeah, and if you're ever in the Bay, let's go on a hike or something, man. It'd be a lot of fun. Yep.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, well, have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.